Well, hello and welcome everybody to the Wealth Builders Real Estate Webinar. I'm Karen Conrad, Vice President of Wealth Builders, and on behalf of Billy and Becky Epperhart, we want to welcome you and thank you for being part of the Wealth Builders family. Boy, I tell you what, we're so excited about the real estate workshop this weekend, and really there's so much to talk about. What is going on in the market, right? We're going to help make sense of that, which is part of the vision of Wealth Builders, is making sense of making money for making a difference. And everybody on here, and part of why you're probably joining us as well, is our favorite way to make that money to make a difference is through real estate investing. And so tonight we have got a great panel. We've got two real estate coaches that are part of Wealth Builders. I want to introduce them to you. We've got Mike Davis. Mike, can you say hi to everyone?
Hi, glad to be here, Karen.
Thank you, Mike. And Frank Pulley.
Hey guys, thanks for joining us today.
Well, I think you are really going to enjoy this session tonight. We're going to give you a little recap of how we got started in real estate and some of the hurdles and the risks that we've had to overcome, which I think is top of mind of people right now. And then we have got 10 questions that we are going to answer as a panel that's going to give you some insight into real estate investing today. I want to share with you some exciting news before we get started, is that we've actually got a special webinar price for you. Those of you that would still like to join us this weekend for the live stream, we're completely sold out in person, which we are actually every time. But the live stream is going to be a great experience for you. And it's normally $399. But if you go to wealthbuilders.org and go to events, you can use the code webinar and you can get an $84 discount tonight if you still want to be a part of it. And I do want to mention to you too, I know that everybody's busy on weekends, it's a lot to take in, but you'll have access to the entire live stream for 3 weeks after the event. So I just want to encourage you, if you want to learn more about real estate investing and have that intensive experience, is going to be over 20 hours of teaching, you might want to consider the live stream. So, okay, well, you guys, let's go ahead and get started. I mean, Billy talks about that anything that we do that's going to make a difference does require some risk. And we know that, we've gotten in the game, but there are ways for us to mitigate the risk as well. And so I just want to hear a little bit about your stories of how you got into real estate, and share a nugget or two with us about what about that experience, like what hurdles did you have to overcome? What risk did you face that you were able to tackle? And so Mike, I'm going to go ahead and start with you. Kick us off on this one.
All right. I really enjoy looking back in the rearview mirror and realizing how far I've come. But Billy talked to me personally about real estate. I lose track. He does too. Probably about 18, 17 years ago or something. Karen, I spent the whole day, I'm talking from 9 till about 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon, had lunch with him. He talked to me the whole time about real estate, showed me his financial statement to try to say, Mike, this is possible for you. And it was millions of dollars that he was worth back then. And I just felt like when I got back in my car and driving down 925 that I just couldn't do it because I wasn't smart enough. Billy was so much smarter than me, which he is, but I just felt like I didn't have the confidence to do it. And then in 2014, he invited me up again, me and my wife actually, and not talking about real estate, just to have fun. We spent the evening together, and the next morning we had breakfast, and we were finished actually with breakfast. And I said, well, tell me again some stuff about that real estate. What a great way to start a conversation. But anyway, we couldn't find any paper, and he wrote down on a napkin some things, just about 3 or 4 points for me to do, Karen. Wow. And this time, after all these years, I got in my vehicle and I looked at my wife and I said, not only can we do this, but we are going to do this. And within a week or two, I bought my first 2 houses. I mean, it just started exploding from there, and just getting over the hurdle of, you can do this. getting that fear. And I know you're going to mention fear at the end, but talk about fear. But I had to get over the fear. I had to get over the confidence or thinking that I was not able to have the ability to do it. I'm telling you, if you just have 3 or 4 gold nuggets to start off, and it's mitigating the risk. It is. And so I am so thankful for the help of God and for the help of Billy, and just being able to push all of the negativity aside and say, anybody can do this. And it is a fact, Karen, anybody can do this.
Oh my goodness, that's awesome, Mike. And we have a little nugget that we'll save till later because it fits right into one of our questions. But Mike is a typical case too. If you feel like you don't have any money for a down payment, you probably do. And so he'll be sharing that part of the story later with us. Is going to help a lot of you. All right, Frank Pulley.
Well, hey, everybody. I actually owned a retail business with my wife and 2 other people from 1984 to 2006. And we did really well, made good money. It was a retail aquatic sporting goods store. And also we had a travel department that did lots and lots of money. But the one thing that didn't give us was time. And we had kids that were becoming adults and knew we'd be having grandkids. And it just seemed we spent a lot of time at our store. And my wife and I started thinking in the early 2000s, what could get us out of this and not have to make the commitment of time that we're making right now, and still make some decent money and be able to do all the things we want to and give away some too. And so 2002, we started looking into real estate. In 2004, we actually joined Bill Bronchick's mentoring course. And by 2010, my wife and I had done well enough that when Bill Bronchick asked me to do coaching with him, I jumped on. I've been doing it ever since. And I've also been with WealthBuilders for a couple of years, although we've been affiliated with them for probably 5 or 6 years. As far as hurdles, this is kind of a weird one, but it might be same with you. I have a very close family, but my family, not my kids, our kids were very, very much behind us, but a lot of my family, brothers, sisters, parents, etc., thought we were crazy for giving up a very successful job and selling our store. And we sold that store, by the way, to our partners in 2006. And went into real estate full time. And of course, it took a while. We tried to take the high road, took a while, and we got, everybody got on board. The other thing too was I'm a go-getter, and I tend to get in my own way sometime instead of letting the Lord kind of guide me. And I've talked to my fellow coaches about this. I don't do it as bad anymore, but I found that by taking action, but God-led action, that I've been a lot more successful and a lot less stressed when I let the Lord lead me in my business decisions and other aspects of life. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
That's a famous line that Frank has after all of our coaching calls. He always says that. Frank, that's awesome. That's really inspiring. And I'll share just a little bit about our obstacles and kind of how we overcame it too. But I want to mention to all of you that this is an interactive webinar. So we're going to be going through some Q&A together. But at the end, we're going to reserve about 15 minutes to answer your questions. And so I just want to tell you how to do that. You can enter your question in the chat section, or if you're watching us on Facebook, welcome. We're glad to have you. Go ahead and enter your question in the comment section. And we've got a great team behind the scenes that you all don't see that are making this all work for us. So we're so grateful for them, and they'll get those questions forwarded to us. We'll answer as many as possible. So just real briefly, I'll just let you know, I've been around real estate all my life, but there was I don't know, like a fear, you might say, which we'll be talking about, because of going into real estate. I was one of those people that I didn't have a lot of money, but I was really comfortable with it sitting in the bank in case I needed it, which it is important to have a nest egg, that's for sure. But we really had to change our mindset and understand that God had something more for us. So I'm going to share this little part with you and we'll get started. for us, we had to have a revelation, and this is when I say us, I'm talking about my husband Dave and my son Levi, because we do real estate together. That while with our jobs, it's great, we get a paycheck and with contracts and things, but what we were missing is that creative wealth part that is in Deuteronomy 8:18. And we had to have an understanding that we felt a responsibility to take the paychecks, to take the money that we were making and apply it in a way that we were creating wealth. We didn't understand that wealth is actually created. And so we had a whole mind shift to say, all right, this is what we have. We've got our paychecks, but what are we going to do with this to actually create wealth? And so it was in that change and understanding the law of leverage that Dave and I both had this aha moment, and we are like, that's it. So we really started investing. I've been around real estate, remember, investing in real estate a year ago, and we have had 7 properties. We just sold our flip, which I talked about in the last webinar. We've got 6 properties now, and so that's what can happen in a year when you kind of grab a hold of these concepts that Billy and Becky have shared and what these coaches are going to be sharing with you tonight. So let's go ahead and get started with some of our questions. I do have some PowerPoints and some graphs that I'm going to pull up every once in a while to show you some trends. But let's start with question number 1, and this is it, and it's on top of mind of everybody considering real estate investing. How are interest rates going to affect real estate in the future? And so, Frank, I'm going to ask you to kick off on our panel discussion and answer that question for us.
Well, they're definitely going to have an effect. I mean, every quarter point that they go up, and the 3 of us have discussed this before, it's going to knock some people out of the market. Well, the good news is those people are really potential renters. And so that's a good thing for all of us. But I've got to be honest with you. I don't think people should be freaked out by interest rates. You know, when I first started in real estate, a good investor loan was 7 or 8%. We made money even then, not a big deal. I remember when I bought my first house, I thought, this was in the late 70s, I thought I was getting a smoking deal at 10%. And when I refinanced 2 years later for 8%, I thought I was in heaven. So don't be afraid of the interest rates. You build the cost into your deal and you're going to be great. You're going to do just fine.
Awesome. Mike, what's your perspective?
I do believe it will slow down the market because people just won't be able to afford a mortgage when it starts kicking up. And the feds have said, we'll see what happens the rest of this year, that it probably will tick up 2 or 3 more times this year, which means that it's just like Frank said, that it will cause people not to be able to afford that. But I think the bottom line is this, exactly what Frank said. Just because interest rates go up and keep going up does not mean that if you're an investor that you should just say, okay, I'm not going to buy now. Well, we have formulas in place, we have guidelines in place, and it really doesn't, the bottom line is this, it doesn't matter what the interest rates are if you are cash flowing. If you're putting money in your bank, who cares what that line is? If you got money coming in every single month, Karen, then that's what we're looking for. And we have a protection set up, a safety net by how we teach people.
I think that's great because thank you so much, Frank and Mike. It is putting things in perspective. And many of you know I've been in banking, or I was in banking for 25 years before I moved out to Colorado and now to Texas. And I saw all sorts of interest rates environments, and really the traditional or the normal rates are in the range of 6 to 8%. So when we look at the opportunity that we've had maybe in the past 2 years, 3 years of these incredibly low interest rates, we are in a more normal interest rate environment today. Now there's some nuances with that, which we'll touch on regarding investment in second homes, the financing for that. But the key, I agree, is that cash flow. When you know how to analyze a deal, which is what we teach you, and you know what things that you need to, the criteria to meet, really it's not about the interest rate, it's about the cash flow. And there's a lot of opportunities when interest rates rise. So what I thought I would do, you guys, is just pull up, I've got some charts, and so I'll be sharing some of those, and then not like moving around to the right ones, but this was one in particular. And let me just make this so that you can see the whole slide. This is quite a perspective. Now, this particular only goes to the end of 2021, and we know that there's been a blip up, and I'll show you where that lands. But if we were to look at 30-year mortgage rates historically, and this goes back to 1975, we can see here that, I mean, at the end of 2021, it was like unheard of, right? And we might say, gosh, I wish I would have bought more. I know we talk about that, but there's different things in the market. It's an advantage, but it's also can be a disadvantage if you're an investor as well. Right now, what we're seeing is those interest rates have popped up maybe around here. But if you look historically, and this is to help everybody calm down and know it's going to be okay, we're really still on the lower end of the average interest rates looking back. And so I think that helps all of us to kind of get perspective and just know that we're going to be okay as long as we follow the guidelines. All right, here's the next question, guys. And Mike, I'm going to start with you on this one. How will inflation affect the real estate future?
Well, it causes our dollars to lose value, and prices going up and the value of the dollar is going down. And so inflation will definitely affect the market. I believe the last time I've talked to Billy, I don't know if he still holds this true, but he said the housing market's probably close to 20% overpriced. And because of the inflation, and there's such a shortage, so it's like the perfect storm. There's a shortage of homes, and we're going to talk about that, I know, but with inflation and a shortage of homes and the supply chain, it's all causing things to really just people, there's not enough homes to buy and they can't build them fast enough. So this inflation that you're talking about, Karen, will cause people to not be able to purchase homes as well because they just won't be able to afford it. I don't know, Frank, the median price of a home in Denver it's over 500,000, I believe
Close
now.
to six.
Pardon me?
Close to six.
Close to $600,000,
Yeah.
Karen, for a median price of a home. You talk about inflation going through the roof. And people, 4 or 5 years ago, I kept saying, I'm pretty sure Denver's going to start leveling off, but it never did. Every year until now, it's almost 600,000. So that's going to cause people, I think, the fear factor. The inflation of this, they're just going to back out of it. And also they just can't afford it. So inflation plays a big part when it comes to investing in real estate.
Okay, great. And so how do you see, and Frank, I'll position this question towards you. So how do you see as an investor or somebody looking to get into real estate investing, is there a silver lining to this apparent cloud? How do we respond to this inflation, and how does it affect us in either getting in the game or to expand if we're already in the real estate market?
Well, that's a great question. And I will tell you that if you look at the way housing has risen over the years, some years down, some years up, Mike, it's what, 6% a year for like the last 70 years?
5 to 6% appreciation for the last 75 years. Yeah.
But if you look at real estate, I mean, it keeps pace with inflation. It's just almost an automatic correction for inflation. And the stock market and almost anything else you're going to do will not do that. When you have inflation go up, you still have people that are going to rent properties. Your properties are going to appreciate. And it really, and there are times, admittedly, where they may go down a little bit, but in the long haul, they're going to do well. Mike, your properties in Pueblo, what, quadrupled in value almost?
I bought my first house for $45,000. It's in the low twos now, 225, 250. But there's a bidding war. We're doing in Pueblo what they did in Denver. I had a friend who just tried to bid on a duplex, and he got outbid by $30,000 over the asking price. So It's good. But the great thing, Karen, is this, Billy always says this as well, is that rentals, when you have rentals, they are inflation proof.
Yeah.
Because as inflation goes up, so does rent. So that's a great thing about investing in real estate.
Yes,
It
absolutely.
is. And the slide that I have before you is a median sales price of houses. And you can see like it is a steady up. And what's interesting about this, it helped me to put things in perspective because I was in banking during this dip. Okay. It was not fun for banks. And we'll be sharing with you how this is different than what happened in the 2008 to 2010 as well. But even then, as devastating as that felt, I just remember because looking at my statement with an executive home in Minnetonka, Minnesota, it's like, oh, I just lost like, $200,000 in no time, right? Very scary. We teach you how to mitigate that so it's not going to affect you in the real estate investing market. But even in the whole, like a bigger perspective, look at this. That seemed like the world was going to come to an end. But look at it's just a little blip. And then what happened is it started to recover and go back up. So you're going to see little blips and then it goes back up. What the guys are talking about, and we will cover this in more detail too, is even though housing values you see a blip, and particularly now, with inflation, less people are going to be able to afford a home. What happens in the rental market, and I'll find this for you, this chart, is that the rental market is pretty much a straight shot up. And so when you're in a situation where less people can afford to buy a home, that is when those buy and holds actually are in a great position. And so I'm just going to try, right here. See this? Here's the history of rental rates, and this just goes back to 1997. But look, there might be a little dip, here, but nothing compared to the values. And so that's when you follow the criteria, like the $300 a door, the 1 to 1.5%, the 3 to 4 times in median income that we share with you. When you lock in those rates and you've got that spread, you can know that that asset, when you look at history, is going to just keep increasing, and that net income is going to increase over time. So I think that in itself is very, very encouraging. All right, number 3. This is a really good one. Frank, I'm going to start with you on this one. Hey, let's talk about new builds and where we stand, and in particular, the impact that new builds have had on what is like in the like what's been happening that is actually kind of showing its true colors in what is happening in the housing market today, Frank.
Well, I mean, as far as new builds, assuming that that Mike has talked about formulas that we use as real estate professionals in order to calculate if the thing, property is a good deal or not. If that lines up, new builds are a great value. You've got relatively low interest rates, and guess what? You probably have no maintenance whatsoever on those things for at least 5 years, maybe longer. So I think they're a good way to go, but the numbers got to be right. Mike, you want to talk about that supply thing?
Well, I know in my city, Pueblo, they're just not able to build them enough. And Karen, I believe you have a graph that we're going to talk about how over the last few decades, there's been 22 in the low to mid 20 million homes. Look at that. 21 million, 20 million, 25 million, 25 million, 26 million, 27 million in each decade. And then this last decade, are you kidding me? 5.8 million homes for the whole decade. And yet, you think about this, Karen, the population has not gone down in the United States. It continually goes up every year. And yet we have one of the lowest home builds in this past decade. And I can't read it, probably, what's the very first one, Karen? I can't read that date.
1930 to 1939.
So good night. So almost 100 years, 90 years, in the last 90 years, we've had one of the lowest amount of homes being built in this decade. And so people are needing a place to live. And that's the great thing that Billy says about real estate. It's not something that you really have to advertise because everybody needs a place to live. And yet, because of 5.8 million homes being built in this last decade, that's not enough. And Billy says that the statistics and the experts are saying that a very minimum, it's going to take 5 years to even remotely catch up to the enough homes being built. So.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm going to keep this slide up with our next question. But one thing that really this helped me is I could not wrap my head around why do we have such a shortage of homes? It just didn't make sense, right? Because we not only have a shortage in properties to buy, but rentals are like really tight, particularly in some areas, which is good for us as real estate investors. But this really answered that question. Now, this next question is what can history tell us about real estate? And I'm leaving this slide up because I want to make a point for you. One of the times that I think it is the most millionaires were created, you might say, was back in the Depression. And the reason for that is that there's a lot of, gloom, a lot of fear. I mean, it was real. My parents tell me stories about what it was like. They lived in the Depression. But those that saw the times in same thing in 2008 to 2010 realized that that's actually a time to buy. But look at this. If you look back and you look at the 1930 to 1939, that was during the Depression. And there were very few homes that were built. And then it doubled to 9.6. And then all at once during recovery in the 1950s, we were in the 20s. And that, look, all the decades that went to. And then all at once now, and this was last decade, this isn't even into the 2020s, it's dropped back down again. So I find that historically, we're actually tracking on new home builds back to the time of the Depression. The other thing too that we're dealing with right now with the new homes is a supply chain issue. And we are all feeling that. Builders are definitely feeling it in some areas more than others. And I mentioned this in the Fix and Flip webinar last time, but you kind of have to pay attention to where the shortages are in the areas that you're buying. There's different shortages in different areas. But I want to just plant a seed of hope, looking at things historically. If in the 1930 to 1939, more millionaires were created than any other time in history, maybe there is something for us to pay attention to in this time in history when we've got this similar metric. But with that, I'm going to start with you, Frank. What can history tell us about real estate?
Well, real estate, although it has its blips, is a pretty dependable way to invest money. And I mean, and more millionaires have actually been made ever using real estate. I mean, more than the stock market and more than anybody else as far as the number of people. So it's a good investment. And guess what? It takes education, and it takes a business sense of knowing the numbers. But honestly, it's not rocket science. Unlike the stock market, in my opinion. You got to be really good at that game.
That's awesome. Mike, what can history tell us about real estate?
Well, like Frank mentioned a while ago, over the last 75 years, real estate, there's been dips, just like you've shown on the graphs, but for the last 75 years, the average appreciation for real estate homes has been 5 to 6%. What does that mean? Every 5 to 12 years, your real estate's going to double. And if you had $1 million in the bank in 2000 and you kept it there saying, you know what, I just want to have cash. I just want to have money. That $1 million today, I don't have the exact numbers, but I think it's between $600,000 and $700,000. That's what your $1 million would be worth today. If you would have bought $1 million worth of real estate in 2000, it would be almost triple that. It'd be almost like 3 million, if I'm not mistaken. If the median prices of homes, I think it was a little over 100,000, I'm not for sure exactly, just a little bit over 100,000 in the year 2000. And so what was it now? 350 in that graph that you showed. So if you had $1 million worth of real estate in 2000, it would be tripled that. So you talk about inflation proof.
Yeah.
Real estate will teach you. History is so great a teacher in that.
Yeah.
real estate is an awesome thing to invest in. It's kind of like art. It holds and keeps it going up in value.
Yeah, yeah.
It does. Plus, when you think about the benefit of it too, it's like instead of a stock, and there is a place for stocks. We teach on that. We have, Wealth Builders investment services. Certainly, there's a place for that in all of our portfolios. But one thing that I like about real estate is, I can walk in it. I
Yes.
can
Yeah.
actually step into that. And who's in control of that investment? I am, you are, versus buying a stock. We don't even have a say unless we're Elon Musk, and you find out he hardly has a say, right? But anyway, we don't have a say in how a company is managed that we buy stock in. But when we buy real estate, we're in the driver's seat to be able to make decisions on that. And we're really in control of the future of that asset. So I think that is a very big positive. Also, I'll just share, I'm really thinking about my parents a lot. My dad is 90 years old. He's president of a bank for all my life, just sharp as a tack. But something that my mom always said is my parents did everything they needed to do to be able to buy the family farms. So if you looked at it on paper, they were really tight on money, but they knew the value of real estate, and they did everything they could to retain and own those family farms. And something that my mom said to me that still I just hear today is she's like, I just want to know that if there's ever anything in the world that happened, I want to know that you kids and your families have a place to go. And that just stayed with me. And I'm just thinking about rental properties that we have. We've got a place to go, but also to create that place for other people to go, feel safe, and live their lives is a huge blessing and very unique to real estate. All right, number 5 is the market going to see a lot of foreclosures, and how will that affect the market for us real estate investors? And so, Mike, I'm going to start with you on this one.
I believe so, but I just want to make one other just really common sense
Sure.
thing is that, I've had stock before and it went down to zero and I had nothing. But people are afraid, like, well, what if the housing, it busts, the bubble busts? I tell people, I still have a house. I still have a house. And so I have the capability of it coming back. When your stock goes down to zero, you have nothing. And so anyway, what was that question again? One more time.
If the market, that's a great point, Mike. Thank you for saying that. If the market's is the market going to see a lot of foreclosures, and how will that affect those of us that want to do real estate investing or are in real estate investing?
I've read a couple of articles from banking experts, and they do say that this year and probably closer toward the end of the year, we will see more foreclosures because of this. In 2020 and 2021, banks were doing everything possible not to repossess the people's homes. And so there's this one bank, all banks aren't created equal, but they would they said, you don't have to make any payments for 12 months. And then this one customer, he said, I'm still not able to make, they added like another 3 months onto that. But let's just get real. Banks cannot continually do that. My best friend is a bank president, and he's told me, he says, Mike, what some people think, oh, these bankers just want to repossess our homes. He said, that's the last thing we want to do. We do not want to get into the real estate business. We are a banking business. We don't want to get, and Karen, you can vouch for that. You were in the banking. But he said this, there comes a point when, the banks do have to get paid. They do have to get paid. And so they can't just, in 2020 and 2021, I mean, they were bending over backwards, but we are coming to the end of that. And so the banking experts say that there will be more foreclosures this year, and probably more and more and more. So that will open up the door for investors.
Great. All right. Thank you, Mike. Frank.
Well, I think it's a lot different than the mid 2000s. When there were a lot of liar loans and false appraisals. I mean, these things are solid right now. And because of a number of reasons, including the pandemic, people haven't been able to make their payments, but there will be foreclosures. But guess what? Number one, I don't think the lenders are going to just dump them on the market. They made that mistake before and it tanked the market. They're going to trickle them out, and it might level out the market a little bit, but you know what? a lot of these foreclosures already have equity in them. So a lot of times the banks are going to go ahead and foreclose. A lot of investors may not buy the ones that have a lot of equity in them, but the bank will put it back on the market, probably at an attractive price as an REO, real estate owned property, or bank owned as you see it on the MLS. Others that don't have equity, again, if you have opportunities to maybe make offers on those with your realtor, and the banks might be able to accept a little less than what's owed.
Yeah, and I can vouch for what both of you are talking about. Banks do not want to be in the real estate business. I personally sat in front of federal examiners during that last recession, and we had all sorts of REOs, which is real estate owned, on the books, and that is not what banks want to repeat. So I do think that there's some opportunity, and I would encourage you, part of what we do encourage you, and Billy will be sharing with you this weekend, is get relationships with local banks. Matter of fact, he suggests that you have 3 banks that you work with, and there's all sorts of things happening in the big banks, even including like a social capital score and all that. So the local banks is one of the best ways to go. And if you have that relationship, if there is a foreclosure coming up or there is an REO, their interest is to get that sold at a decent price. And so we have a close friend. He's 80 years old. No, actually, he's 90 years old. He lives right here in South Lake. And he is in commercial real estate. Dave and I have spent some time with him, and he's got banks that he's worked with doing just what I'm sharing with you right now about relationships. And they'll call him up and say, hey, I've got this property that's coming back in as a foreclosure. He was able to recently, at 90 years old, pick up a property at about $10 million that was worth $13 million. And just because he had that relationship, they knew that he knew what to do and he would handle it well. He basically got a gift of $3 million in equity with that property. So I think the opportunities and all of this are there, but I agree, this will not look like what happened in the 2008 to 2010 market. All right, number 6. All right, we're in inflation. We're in a high interest rate environment. We have record low supply. The question is, what are some strategies that we can use to be successful in real estate investing? And so, Frank, I'm going to start with you on this. What are some strategies to share?
Well, hang around this weekend and we're going to teach you a whole bunch of them. I'm serious. I mean, Bill Bronchick and Billy Epperhart could probably tell you 15 different ways to purchase properties. If you don't have a lot of money, there's always wholesaling, which we're going to be doing a section on that. There's creative financing, where the seller may want to get rid of their property and you don't have to put a lot of money down. You don't have to involve banks or any of that kind of stuff. If you have a lot of money or you have funding, well, buy and holds make sense. I think strategies, you can use almost any strategy right now. It kind of depends on your personal circumstances.
Awesome. Mike?
I'll just make 2 points. One is, like you said earlier, when I told Billy I had $5,000 in my savings back when I started, and I said, Billy, I know that's not enough money. And he says, well, do you have any equity in your home? And I said, well, it's going to be paid for in 2 years. And he got more excited than anybody when he would come talking about it. He says, Mike, you can do this. You can do this. He got so excited about it. And so I did take the equity from my home. So that's one thing. And then the second thing, as far as finding, and like you said, the shortage of homes, inflation, and all of this, we've been teaching people, and you can look over the United States and find communities that are 200,000 or less in population. And that's where you can find some great deals still. I mean, you're talking about Denver, 600,000. Of course, the numbers aren't going to work at a $600,000 home,
Right.
But there's many communities throughout the United States that are 200,000 or less in population. And you can still buy homes, believe it or not, Karen, under $200,000 for a home. And you talk about the numbers working and cash flowing, they still do. So in spite of the shortage, in spite of inflation, in spite of all the interest rates going up, there are places that you can make this work.
I totally agree. And part of it is perspective, right? I know
Yes.
when we started investing, we were looking so like really felt like all we could see in our mind was to invest around our home in South Lake, Texas. Well, if you want to spend $800,000 on a home, that's what it would take in South Lake. And I just couldn't, we didn't have that much money to put all our eggs in one basket. There was no way. And so, just stretching our brain to kind of what Mike just described, we started looking outside of this market within a 2 hour drive, and we were able to pick up properties. I think it was 145. I think we ended up on 155 on one, new build at 210, and we were much more comfortable having multiple properties at that price range, and it met all the ratios. So we've got coaching clients that are investing really all over the United States. We talked to you about a team, how to make that happen, but there are strategies for you to be able to get into real estate and be smart about it. And exit strategies are a big thing too, but we'll go over all that, a lot of that this weekend that you'll learn even more on this topic. All right, number 7, I don't have a lot of money. How can I invest in real estate? Mike.
Well, like I just said, you can take the equity out of your home. You can do a refi or get a HELOC, a home equity loan. You can take that out. But there's other ways, thinking outside of the box. And like you both, Frank, and you have said, that we'll be talking about that this weekend, as far as you can get the owner to carry the loan. And if you got a person, we've heard stories that somebody, they want to sell 10, they were an investor, now they want to totally get out of it, they have 10 homes they want to sell. Well, guess what would happen for their taxes if they sold 10 homes? What they would have to pay, it would be tremendous amount of money. But guess what, if they do a owner carry, they're only going to pay taxes on the interest that they get and the down payment that you give them, and you will be able to just start getting into the real estate investor really quick. And so there's many ways, but I'll stop right there.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Frank?
Well, again, I mentioned wholesaling. Wholesaling means you pick up a property at a discounted price and then you wholesale it for, I don't know, a few $1,000s to an investor that's actually going to rehab it and take the risk. There's not a lot of risk in doing that. You don't risk a lot of money. You have to market pretty hard to find those. Again, the creative financing, where you find a motivated seller that's having a problem with their home and they want to move, they want to be rid of it. And believe it or not, there's those guys out there. And finally, and I don't want to get too far in the weeds on this one, but if you have a substantial amount of money in your IRA, you can use that for real estate investing also.
Yeah, that's great. And we share more on that. There's a lot of things around that, but I've worked with investors in the Colorado Springs area, and that's what they use to do their flips and stuff. So it's a really viable way to put your IRA money to work that you can actually control, right? All right, this is one of the most common questions that we receive from our coaching clients, and it is, should I do a cash out refinance or should I do a home equity loan? Frank?
Well, I'm going to give you Bill Baranchik's attorney answer. It depends. Up until, a few months ago, I thought cash out refis were the best thing since sliced bread, but you got to be careful now, because if you're doing a cash out refi and you got like a really smoking good loan rate and you can't refinance your property and take out cash, number one, that's got to be paid back, and number two, it may be at a bit higher or maybe even substantially higher interest rates. So you got to be careful about those. They still work. And what's great about the money that you pull out of there, it's non-taxable. So as far as HELOCs, Mike, you want to hit that one?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'm just like you, Frank. Matter of fact, I did do a refi 2.375 when I did mine. And so now if you're doing investment loans, it could be up to 6, and Karen just paid in the low 6s. And so HELOCs are being more attractive to people. And let me just say this about HELOCs, don't just think they're all the same. You need to go to the banks and say, what fees, what interest rates do I have to pay back? You really need to do, just like Karen said, make a relationship with a banker, because that's who's going to be able to help you. And you can sit down and say, this is my goals. This is what I want to do. What do you suggest? And that banker, he wants you to succeed. So make a relationship with a banker. And like I said, I went to almost I think I did go to every mom and pop bank in the city of Pueblo and trying to get a portfolio loan, and none of them would do it. I went all the way up north to get one. And so make a relationship with a banker, and HELOCs could be the way to go for you.
Yeah, I would just add that there's kind of a tipping point when you look at HELOCs and you look at cash out refinance, and it definitely is based on interest rate. And a HELOC is generally always a variable rate.
Right.
And so there's a lot of terms that you have to take a look at. And if the numbers work with a cash out refi and you can fix it for 30 years, I think that is a great way to go. And like the guy said, we've been recommending that. But I've even been looking at some ARM products, which we won't have time to get into on this webinar. But there is a time in the market that you start to look at that risk with a variable rate is worth it. And then when the rates go down to a point that you are actually able to lock in, then you can move that into a cash out refinance. So I don't know that we're there yet, but these are all good points to consider, pros and cons. And we'd like to talk through too and learn a little bit more about your situation. We do that with the coaching clients before we solidly recommend one or the other. All right, number 9, and I'm going to go back to you, Mike, on this one. With changes in Freddie and Fannie, how can I get financing?
Well, I do believe that I think you've even found this out, Karen. Freddie and Fannie are clamping down. It used to be you could get 10 homes with pretty much at ease. And so now Freddie and Fannie are not wanting to do that. They're charging points. They're charging all kinds of things against that. So again, if to get past the Freddie and Fannie, and let me just explain this for those who may not know, when a bank takes your loan, they sell the paper to Freddie and Fannie, and so they are the ones who make the rules of how many investment loans you can have, and what the interest rate's going to be, and how many points you're going to pay. Again, you can go to a mom and pop bank who's going to keep the loan in-house, and then there's not a limit on, oh, you can only have 10 loans, or you can only do this. And so you can get past the Freddie and Fannie if you can do what we call a portfolio lending. And again, you may have to go to many banks before they'll say, yeah, we're going to keep your loan in-house, which means they're not going to sell it to Freddie and Fannie.
Yeah, that's really good. We are very fresh with this just because we went under contract just a couple of days ago on a condo, and had the opportunity to really learn firsthand what the changes were with Freddie and Fannie. Basically, they've come out with a policy, I would say, to kind of penalize or discourage the second home investor or the investor. And one of the questions that we'll be getting to here in just a moment has to do with like BlackRock and things like that are able to self-fund. But here's the thing. If you're going to purchase an investment property right now, you just have to be prepared. You're going to have points on there. That is the standard. However, in comparison, until we see some of the local banks, I feel like they should recognize the opportunity. I was sharing with the guys earlier, they can still borrow money at almost 0%, maybe it's 0.5%. And the market right now is calling for, with an investor property, really in the low 6s, at least with a condo. With a single family, it might be a little bit lower than that, plus points. So when you think about a spread, I think that there's going to be something coming in to fill that gap in the market if they don't become heavily regulated. Also, I'm hearing about a lot of companies that are springing up that are offering private financing. People that are looking at the stock market and saying it's too volatile. I want to put myself in something that is more solid. And so they'd actually put it in a pool. I think we're going to see some opportunities here.
Yep.
The other thing is I deal with a lot of different lenders, and it's really crazy. They all have basically the same rates and they have the same points. There's hardly any difference. The one area that you want to ask about is your lender going to charge you an origination fee on top of the points that are kind of being mandated by the Freddie and Fannie. And that's where you can find that differentiator. However, that said, we're in an environment that, despite all of that, if those numbers work that we've been talking about, it's still going to be probably your lowest rates overall until we see something kind of bud or come forth from local banks or from private investors to try to make it work with a Fannie Freddie product. Personally, I think it's a knee-jerk reaction.
Yeah.
I think we need to get out and vote, and we need to have our voices heard, because it's clear that the environment that we're in is really going down a path that is opposite of really that entrepreneur spirit, that real estate investor. So get out and vote and help us change some of these guidelines. All right, number 10. All right, guys, the fear factor. And we're going to cover this, and then we're going to start with the questions. How do we deal with fear in the real estate market? And Frank, I'm going to start with you.
Well, number one, trust in the Lord. That a lot of investors don't. They don't have that guidance. And I'm telling you, it is a powerful thing if you'll let it be a powerful thing in your life. The next thing is get educated, because risk in real estate goes way down when you're educated and know how to use the formulas, know what to look for, and that sort of thing. I mean, those two things. And finally, having a trusted guide or mentor is invaluable. I can tell you, without my mentors, I would not be sitting here sure as the nose on my face. And that's a pretty big nose. So.
That's funny, Mike.
I really don't have anything to add to that. Those are the three great points. And I know you've got some things to say about that. So I'll pass it on to you, Karen.
Thanks. Well, yeah, this is one of those things that I think if we look back on our lives, there's times where fear tries to come in, and definitely, especially, when we hit traumatic times in our life or rough times, or maybe we've had a bad experience. I think one of the things is, based on that, we kind of get afraid to step out and do something. The reminder is, and the truth is that fear is never from God. Okay, so if you've got something that's making you feel anxious, it's making you feel worried, you can know that that's not of God. And so this is a time during challenging times, during fearful times, it's that time where you just know, I'm going to dedicate to really meditating in the Word of God about this, and get fear out of my life. The opposite of fear, many people say, is faith. But I would say that it's trust in God. Who are you trusting in? I'm either trusting in fear, which would be the world, the devil, the negative, or I'm going to trust in God. And when you really put yourself in a place to know, like, wow, I need to trust God with this. It's amazing how you start to hear his voice clearly. When you are dealing in fear, you are going to make decisions that are skewed because you're looking through the wrong lens. You're looking through a lens of the enemy's perspective rather than God's. Also, remember this, the promises of God are not like, oh, in a good economy, or only when there's not inflation, or they only work when the administration is, favorable to what we want to do. That's not what God's word says. So in that, when you get your mind right with that, and instead your prayer is, Lord, help me see the opportunity in this, and you do things like you're doing tonight, where I'm going to get as much knowledge and wisdom, natural knowledge and wisdom, and supernatural spiritual wisdom and knowledge. These are the times that you can really shine, right? You can be that unique person in the crowd and carry that mantle of faith. And in that, you are going to see opportunities that open up before you because you're trustworthy to walk in them. And the final thing I'm going to say on this, we'll get to questions, is Billy has the funniest story. It was not funny at the time, but you guys will remember this. He lost $1 million in one day.
Yeah.
Can you imagine?
Yeah.
And he shares the reason was he panicked. He was in fear. And it was a time where he sold it. He lost $1 million. And then was it 3 hours after that, the price bounced back up. And so he had to sit down with Miss Becky and explain how he had lost $1 million. And that was a very expensive lesson that he learned. But he's so gracious to share that with us.
Yeah.
Took him 3 weeks to tell Becky, though. Took him 3
Oh,
weeks.
he did? Okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Yeah, but making decisions through a lens of fear is never a good idea.
Oh,
And so it's an opportunity. All right, this is great. So we have got so many questions, and we're going to get to as many as possible. I'm going to make a commitment to you guys right now. We're not going to get to all of them. We'll get to as many as possible, but we will do a podcast like we did this last week based on the webinar, or 2 weeks ago, the webinar I did in Fix and Flips. And we as a team will get together and we will answer questions that are not answered tonight. Here we go. This one is from Tamara Allen. Hello, Tamara. Thanks for joining us. And her question is, Mike, I'm going to send this one to you. My husband and I have $100,000 in equity in our home. Should we leverage our home to get started?
I would say yes. You know, they generally say you don't want to take they may give you up to 90%. I think even Billy suggests I wouldn't take more than 80% of the equity out of your home, but absolutely. And this is what I would do. I wouldn't take that $80,000 and try to get, I would try to put that on in as many down payments of homes that I could purchase. So in other words, don't go out and look for $300,000 and $400,000 homes. Look into the market that we've been talking about, under $200,000, and try to only put 20% down, and that equity in your home can go much further.
That's awesome. All right, I'm going to move through these pretty fast. Just so you guys know, we do something at the real estate workshop called speed coaching, not speed dating, speed coaching. And I feel like this is like a speed coaching, right? We're going to get as many as possible. All right, Frank, I'm going to direct this one to you. This is Tad Beach. Hello, Tad. Thanks for joining us. He says, I have a duplex, renting the upstairs and living downstairs with a roommate. I'm currently filing a secular C. I don't know if he meant secular or not, but he says, should I start an LLC for my duplex?
Well, again, that depends. And because I'm not an attorney, I can't really answer that for you. Everybody is a little different. And that's one you'd want to talk to Bill Bronchick or whatever about, because like I say, everybody's just a little bit different. And I think I could steer you right, but I don't want to give you legal advice because I'm not an attorney.
All right, fair enough. And Bill Bronchick would be a great person to
Yes,
ask
he would.
It's the type of
Yes,
stuff that if you do end up like getting serious and want to be in the coaching program, you have access to Bill. So this would be a perfect question for that. All right, this is from Candy Bourne. Frank, I'm going to send this right back to you. She says, if we own a second home with a mortgage, how do we reclassify it as a rental?
Well, basically, again, you're going to want to talk to your accountant on how they want that done, but it depends on how it's classified right now. I mean, if it's just classified as a second home, I mean, it's easy to form an LLC and move that property into an LLC. There's usually no tax ramifications with that. You would want to talk to your attorney, though, about moving a second home into an LLC and see if there's any tax consequences. I don't believe there is, but if you're going to hold it as a rental, I'm telling you, you have got to be using it as an entity. I'm going to talk this weekend about the value of entities. They really protect you.
That's great. Just from a financing perspective, the conventional loans, they pretty much kind of require that you stay in the designation you purchased the home at for 12 months. Now, there are exceptions to that, but what's interesting about a second home, if you look at the Fannie and Freddie guidelines, you actually have the ability to rent that home out for up to 180 days in the year and still stay within the second home classification. So I'm hoping that helps somebody just take a look at that. And I actually traveled through that whole process, and we can talk more about it if you're coming to the event, or we'll try to even touch more on it in the podcast. All right, Mike, this is from Eileen Judge. This is a great question. These are all great questions. This is very interesting. I have my eye on a house that has been vacant for over 4 years. What would your concerns be for inspections and buying something in this situation?
Well, I wouldn't have any fear as far as checking it out, because I think there's homes that nobody wants to mess with that actually could be great deals. Now, if it's been on the market for 4 years, you can almost bank on that there's definitely something wrong with it. But I don't have a problem. Like I said, if Billy's even bought homes that had termites, people would say, "Oh, don't touch that." And what he did, he just had a termite inspector and did all kinds of things. So I would definitely check it out.
Yeah.
Always don't be afraid to check out any kind of real estate. And if it's been sitting on the market, the longer it sits on the market, the more negotiating you can do. So I kind of like that.
Yeah.
That's awesome. All right, this one I'll take. This is from Robert Chambers, and he says, how do you feel about owning rentals over 100 miles away from where you live? I'm in an area where the market is so hot you can't find a property that meets the 1% rule, probably within 100 miles. Robert, that is exactly the situation that we were in, and we ended up buying properties about 120 miles away. And the way that we handled that is we found a really strong team and we found a great property manager. So we still spent time down there. It was drivable, but we also own properties in Cocoa Beach, Florida, which is a 24-hour drive, which I'm not going to make. That's a fly there. And again, it goes down to a team. And if you can have someone that you know on the ground, we've got some coaching clients that they are buying in areas where their kids live. They have relatives there. So there is all sorts of options for you. But I think that is very common right now because so many markets where we live in, like, it's just not a place to invest. So there's a lot of hope for that. We'll cover more about that this weekend as well. And also Charlotte just sent in a question, and she's heard us talk about the coaching clients. We've got a great group of coaching clients. Many of them are on. And she said, how do we learn about this or get into this coaching program? What you can do is you can email us at info@wealthbuilders.org. And if you think you might be interested in coaching, us three will get on a free Zoom consultation with you. We spend about a half hour with you to make sure that we understand your situation. We answer questions just to help you if you've got anything immediate. And then from there, you have the opportunity if you want to opt into the coaching program or not. And we'll be talking about that a lot this weekend as well. Wow, we covered a lot in this. We've got a lot more questions to go that we'll cover in the Wealth Builders podcast this week. And so if you want to check out that, we're on Spotify. You can go to Billy's YouTube. You can go to our website and you can connect with the podcast. If you haven't listened to our podcast, the last probably 5 have been focused on real estate. So I'd encourage you to take advantage of that. Also, a reminder that if you're interested in joining us by live stream this weekend, use the code webinar and go to wealthbuilders.org/events. And that code is going to be available for you just for this evening. And then tomorrow it goes back up to the regular price of $3.99. But I can tell you the value is there. I don't know how we would have never been able to get started if we hadn't really attended actually several of the real estate workshops. So again, we just want to thank you so much for joining us tonight. Frank and Mike, thank you. Wealth Builders team, thank you so much. And you for joining us, our Wealth Builders family. We really appreciate you tuning in. God bless you and have an awesome rest of the night.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.